Once again, the pine beetle infestation has taken over the freaking Champions Cup, and they have made some very interesting decisions on where they moved it to next. Let's talk about it. Alright, so this is the second time they've had to reschedule, with the first reschedule happening at the end of the tour, which was going to put the Champions Cup right after the Pro Tour Championship, which people were definitely not excited about, but at least they were able to have the major, and now that has actually been rescheduled because the Pine Beetles have taken over once again. They've actually not started any of the clear up process that was needed to actually make this course playable, and at least in my head, I was thinking that this was not a for sure thing, so the fact that people are already making plans and kind of solidifying this as the hard set rules and schedule, I kind of thought like, I don't know if that's really going to be the case. So the fact that it was again rescheduled is not really a surprise to me, but they actually moved it to a totally different location. They're actually moving it to Northwood, which does mean that we have the same situation that we had a couple years ago where we had two events in Emporia, Worlds, and then DDO. And even though they will not be using the same course for Champions Cup and the Ledgestone Open, they will still be playing in the exact same area twice in one season. And it does kind of beg the question, like, could we not have found any better courses to do this or any kind of variety? Because people are so desperately clamoring for some variety in the tour season. So similar thing to that, people don't love it, players don't like it, but the big issue here, it's not like the US players are really hurting too much, being like, oh, we actually get to spread out like the majors, like that's good. That's not the main issue here. The big thing is that there was no consideration for the European section. The European tour goes from May 10th to the end of July. So this is about 6 weeks. This is like the only section that the European players kind of feel like they have to go to. And so the fact that they moved it to the middle of the European swing, overlapping the Swedish Open, really begs the question, does the Pro Tour really even care about the European swing? For the European players, this is like their number one series of events because they can actually be home. They don't have to be so separated from everything, and they can represent like their home country. There's just a lot of important things here. And if you have flights, there's no way you're going to be flying to the US for the majority of the tour, then back to Europe, then back to the US just for the Champions Cup, and then back to Europe for the remaining two events. That is just not going to happen. So far, Vinyl Makala and Nicholas Antala have posted on Instagram being like, this feels kind of stupid. It feels rushed. Feels like they don't really care about us. And I have to say, kind of, yeah, like there was no mention about the Swedish Open anywhere in the press release. So I have to say that there was just no real thought or concern given to the European tour. And then along with that, Paul Macbeth and Eagle McMahon both spoke out against this decision. And you could bring up the point, like, isn't the majority of the tour like people from the US? And yes, obviously yes, the majority of players are there, but there was just a push from the entire Pro Tour and Jeff Spring saying, we want to prioritize the European swing. And they have 5 events, they have some Silver Series, they have a lot of things cooking. So the fact that they're overlapping one of the 5 major events in Europe really does feel like they just don't care. And to me, a kind of double slap in the face is that what was quoted in the important factors for why they did this exact date was majors, obviously, and then A-tier schedules. And I would say A-tier schedules have basically no priority in this entire thing. It has to be like majors, elite plus, elite events, and then European elite events. There's no reason why A-tiers have to be factored into any of this. Like, sure, there may be like 1 or 2 pros that can't go to an A-tier because they're playing like the Champions Cup, but like, who cares? Like, why is that a priority? I don't really know, but I do think this will stir up a good bit of controversy because it does officially kind of cement the Pro Tour as a US tour, not a international tour, not a US and European tour. It is just a US tour that maybe someday will have the same priority in Europe as it does in the US, but that is just not the case right now. So for all those players that are from the US and play the entire tour in the US, probably not going to affect you too much. The best of the best play in Europe for like 1 or 2 events, but primarily the only players that are playing the entire European swing for the 2024 season is probably going to be European players, with the exception of maybe like James Proctor or Ella Hansen. But other than that, there's so few players from the US that will be making a full tour run in the European swing. So it really does not affect that many players. But I do think if you are the staff that was making this decision, and I have to assume it was Nate Heinold to some regard, then they have to really take into account the weight of moving this one event overlapping the European swing, because it does kind of degrade the entire reason that we're doing this whole European section for the 2024 season. And even though it will be moved away from Georgia, it has been determined that it will be coming back in 2025, allegedly, because now we have to really question everything that's being said about this tournament, because it does kind of feel like the Milo McIver situation where there's just a lot of unknowns. So whenever they make hard statements like saying it will be back in 2025, you just don't know. So we will just have to see what comes of it in the future. All right, so with that said, what do you guys think? Do you actually care that it's being moved over like the Swedish Open? Like, I'm sure you guys probably have never even watched the Swedish Open, but knowing that it will be an Elite Series event, comment. Like, do you care more? I'd love to hear about it. And if you are someone that does have strong opinions, be sure to let me know. I would love to be a more informed commentator. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe. Wild Runs, signing out. Peace.